let's get into today's topic. Welcome back to the day 2 conversation that I've been having with my friend. I titled it Surviving Loss because that's really what it sounds like, how he navigated through work, through a self-awareness and noticing he needed therapy or he needed to speak to somebody and just being a parent at the same time. I love this conversation, and so let's jump into part 2 where we continue the conversation. But first, I'm like,
Mhm.
it's kind of interesting how it wasn't even you who came to the realization initially, but it was like
Mhm.
because life switched for you, like it changed. You know what I'm saying? Like if you didn't have a baby and go on parental leave, you still would have been at work. You still would have been going through until, who knows what would have happened. Like I think, well, for me, I did the exact same thing. I went to work. It wasn't the next day, but that's just because I didn't have a job at the time. But I got a full time position 2 months after my son died, and I did overtime. I worked consistently. Like I was always there, first one there, last one to leave, kind of thing. And what happened to me was panic attacks. My body, my physical body, started like shutting down on me, and that's how I knew that something was wrong. Like, that's what initiated that, and I went off on leave and all the other stuff. Um, but I think it's kind of interesting how life moved for you in that way. And that's what caused you to like take a look at it and to be like, wow, okay, something's here. And honestly, I applaud your wife for saying, look, there's something that you need to work out with somebody who's not me, because we're not always equipped to handle these things for our spouses or for the people around us. But it's good that you're able to notice it. I always say self-awareness is so important. Like when people go through life just unaware of what's happening, unaware of how they're feeling, how their internal body is, they're really missing out on opportunities to do something greater or to excel or to grow in specific ways. And I love that therapy was not like a taboo subject. Like I don't know if you've ever like being black, growing up in the black community, if you've ever found like so much conversations around therapy being taboo, especially for being a man. But like, was that anything that you had to deal with in terms of that, or just like, nah, I need the help and that's just what it is? I know for me, working with the men in jail, that was one of the things that I heard. Is that therapy is taboo. Therapy is not something that we're taught to go to. We're taught to keep all of our business private. We're not necessarily taught to have it out in the open. And so it creates a space of feeling like we need to isolate, or feeling like we just keep it pushing, feeling like we can't stop to think or to assess our feelings because that's not what we're taught to do. We're taught that we need to provide and protect. Well, men are taught to provide and protect. And women, yes, we do give ourselves more space to be emotional, but then there's also the rhetoric of the strong black woman where we kind of just like take the punches and we keep going. And so I always find like therapy in the black community to be a lot more of a challenging topic. Now, yes, there's a lot more therapists now and people are speaking out, but then there's also the layer of church for some people. Like they didn't start talking about therapy in church for a while. Um, and I think it's not even so much like the notion of therapy, but just being able to talk about your problems. Because a lot of people go to a pastor and talk their problems to the pastor, but the pastor can't take on everybody's problems. Like he is not equipped to be um listening all day and night to everybody's problems, coming up with solutions, and then also managing a church. And so we kind of lose out a little bit when we put all these layers, or we put all these boundaries on ourselves of when we can talk, how we can talk, where we can speak, who we can speak to, without just being free and open to say, hey, you know what, this hurt, and I'm going to address this issue. This hurt, I'm going to address this issue. Feel like we need to be more open minded on seeking out actual solutions and not just trying to find the easiest way around things all the time.
I guess so. I never really thought about it. Like, and you really said quite a lot there. But for me, no one ever explicitly said, like, I can't speak to anybody else's experience but my own, right? And nobody ever explicitly told me, oh, if if you talk about this, you're weak, or if you that, it was sort of just people. The previous generation can only teach what they themselves know, right? Or
Mhm.
what they learn.
Mhm.
So if my dad's dad only knew work with his hands, for an example, he's going to teach his sons work with your hands,
Mhm.
right? If they in turn learn math, just as an illustration, as an example, they in turn are going to teach their children math. Now, if
Mhm.
the next generation learns, okay, if I stub my toe, I shouldn't just, wrap it with gauze and walk for the next 10 days, or, my foot's going to, and I don't know that my foot's going to rotten off or whatever, but I learned that, okay, maybe I should properly dress it, get some antibiotics. I'm going to teach that to the, and it, to me, generationally, our understanding and knowledge, and how we do things has evolved. To me, that's the truest sense of evolution, because the solution to a child telling a lie 100 years ago was you go pick a switch.
Mhm.
Today, there are parents who will talk to their kids and explain to them and teach them stuff so they realize and understand, okay, lying is bad and this is why it's harmful, or this is why what you said made me feel the way I did and why I yelled. And so now we're raising a more aware child, and there's good and bad to that, and there's good and bad to picking the switch. But the way we do it, maybe you still pick the switch every now and then, but you don't default to that. You know
Right.
what I mean? Your kid
Yes.
talking back to you, for example, it's the default was, oh, I'm gonna punch you in the face at one point in time. Now it's, well, listen, you don't speak to me that way because I'm so and so and so, and it's changed from that. Like even with my parents, like they had me young, and then they had their last few kids later in life.
Right.
So I'm quite a bit older than my youngest sibling, right? And the deviation between how I was raised, the things they would do and wouldn't do, and the things they would tolerate and wouldn't tolerate, vastly different.
Right.
So within even the community, it's probably a slower change because Black people are very stiff-necked, and once we're set in certain traditions, and because of our history, we don't really deviate from it because it's worked for us for as long as it has. And it's like, well, I'm gonna stay in my lane and da 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 and just push through. Other cultures are very similar to that. We just don't know about it because, again, we're not in their community,
Right.
right? I worked for many years in a settings where I interacted with a lot of different cultures, and the thing that struck me the most about it was, in spite of the languages differing and the barriers of language, we're more alike than we are dissimilar. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
Because what an Indian father wants for his daughter is the same thing a Black father wants for his daughter
Right.
and his sons. And at a base level, we want similar things for our loved ones. And to me, that is where we as people are more alike than different.
No, it's
Like
true.
skin. So and there's stigmas around that too in different communities. We, again, because we're not there or we don't hear about it. Oh, that's a white people thing. It's alarming to me that we think, oh, white people are always in therapy, but it's what we see all the time.
Yes.
There's
Yes, it is.
there's there Where does this toxic masculinity narrative really originate from?
The
It's
loudest
not
person
from
in the room.
and who are typically the loudest people in the room. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But saying that to say but just by numbers alone, especially in a North American settings, if the minority has a certain idea towards something, the greater my majority probably does too, because it's prevailing thought that governs what any specific society believes or thinks, right?
Yes. Yes, it is. And so I'm happy to have these conversations to talk about the funny thing is I actually never really wanted to talk about grief
Mm.
specifically. Because I just didn't want to be labeled as grief girl. I really did. Um, I have and the thing is, it's not even that I have a lot of experience in it. Because like people say I have a lot of experience in grief because they experience so many different deaths. I haven't experienced a lot of death, but I experienced a crucial death, which was my son.
Yeah.
And so it really only takes one for you to really reflect, see life, and figure out, hey, how am I going to heal from this? And the conversations, I feel like people have been watching me over the last few years through this journey and have really kind of like admired how I have not broken down publicly, how I seem to have things together publicly, and really just wanting to know how it's done. And so I think now is the time for us to share what we've been through, how we've managed, and how we've not allowed the passing of somebody really to like uproot our lives that we no longer function. Because there's a lot of people who get stuck in that. Who, when one person dies, it's like they died with them and they just do nothing else. But I truly believe that the reason why one dies and the other stays is because God still has a purpose for the person. Like the reason I didn't die that day with my son is because God still has use for me. And I wouldn't be here to talk and to share my story if he had taken me. And so it's interesting that people really kind of allow this thing of grief to kind of like choke out the rest of the life that they had left. And I'm mindful of those. I'm mindful that it can happen, and I'm mindful that these are the conversations that are healing. These are the conversations that people need to hear. That like other people have gone through this journey as well and have found peace essentially while still here on earth, that didn't result in suicide, that doesn't result in a drug habit, sex addiction, food addiction, like all the kind of vices that we typically turn to when life gets rough. So has any of this, or how has any of this, emotions, all of that, shaped you as a father?
Um, what in what way though? Like, how do you mean?
Like being mindful of grief, loss, emotions, all that other stuff. How does it like because I'm sure you have to balance your time. I'm sure you have to balance um, taking care of yourself, prioritizing your health, and all that other stuff. So how does it
Right.
shape you as a father, just like to make a one balance, but b in like the conversations that you want to have with the kids, or just like the way you rapport with them?
To be honest, I honestly don't think grief plays that big of a role
Nice.
in my parenting. Obviously, having to my father pass when my children were still young, I had to explain that to them very, very early.
Mhm.
So my two oldest are very aware. I
Mhm.
don't want to say comfortable, but they're aware of the finality
Mhm.
of it. Definitely, I can't say I know how they process grief because again, their experience with it is similar to mine. Where when I was young, my grandparents passed on, and it was just a thing that happened, and it never really like I see everybody crying, and by
Mhm.
proxy, I would cry too, but not understanding that it's like what it was for me when my dad died, you know?
Right. Right.
So it was always just a thing, growing up where I grew up, it was always, you know, afterwards you get food, but it was never the full weight of it never hit me as a kid. And we try to raise them not too sheltered, but also very protected in a way. So
Mhm.
the certain aspects of life don't they're not they're aware of, but they're not around all the time. So like violence. Sorry, can you give me 1 second?
Yeah. No problem.
Or you could probably pause this or something.
I'll edit it out, no problem.
I gotta go deal with this little guy.
We're
All
almost
right,
done.
come on. Okay.
We'll find a way to wrap it up so that you can get on with
Yeah.
your day.
Oh, that's okay. Well, yeah. So with the kids thing, it's like they're very much adjusted or
Mhm.
well adjusted, I guess is the term,
Mhm.
when it comes to certain things. So it's like, oh, when they hear so and so passed, it's not, oh my gosh, and it doesn't get too crazy. Like they've been to what is it, 3 funerals?
Mm.
My oldest son has been to,
Right.
and he's 11. I'd only been to maybe one by the time I was 11. So
Wow.
yeah, he's a bit experienced in I guess funeral attendance. But yeah, they he actually spoke at his great grandfather's. He read the eulogy with his mom at her grandfather's funeral.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I mean that's good. I mean not good, but able to express themselves
yeah,
in a way as something that's so final. It
yep,
makes it normal instead of trying to like you're too young to come and just like hiding kids away from the truth and making them feel like death is like this scary thing that only happens like I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like we try to protect our kids so much from it that we almost incite like put fear in them about it.
yeah. Well, in my experience, it was always, and I put it into these words all the time. Death or funerals was always something that happened to other people until it happened to somebody that like, and it's funny we do that with a lot of things. I find in
Hmm.
life, it's like a, a car accident doesn't mean as much until you're the one in the accident. You know,
Right.
like a funeral is a funeral until like I had to bury my dad. I
Hmm.
I know quite a few people. Like I've been around for quite a while. So I know quite a few people who lost their loved ones, and it's you just do the polite, the condolences, the you know stay tough and whatever, but it it it's, it hits you differently when it's your people,
Hmm.
and not just your people, because like I've had cousins and aunts and stuff like that, but when it's like okay, I don't want to think on even the mom. Like I have friends who've lost their moms, and I'm like, I don't even I can't put into words anything comforting to say because having gone through what I gone through, I can't imagine. And it was my dad. My dad messed me up,
Mm.
and my dad and my relationship is drastically different than my mom's and my relationship.
Right.
And not that they both mean
Of course.
immensely to me, but
It's
mom
different.
is mom and dad is dad, right?
Right.
It's just like I put myself into that mindset now when dealing with grieving death, because you could grieve other things too, but grieving
Hmm.
death specifically, it's like I don't even want to think on like the levels of like what you went through. I couldn't imagine having to sort of regrow after losing a child.
Right. No,
And
yeah.
and I relate that back to me losing my dad because that brought me to where it brought me. So I can only imagine where losing your child would bring you, or
Hmm.
losing your mom, or losing your spouse, or just these different things that again, when it just the other day, a coworker of mine, you know, on the job, he did something and he died from an accident, and It's like, wow, his family now no longer has their father.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And that's
Mhm.
how do they move on from it? Like he
Right.
left, went to work, and probably did that 1,000 times and didn't come home. It's like these things are hard to process, man.
Yeah, no it is.
Oh,
Even sometimes like how like my son died, he was sick. Some people die suddenly, some people die at the hands of others. Like there's so much
yep,
different varying things when it comes to death. Like no one solution fits all. Um
certainly not.
but what I do know helps is like talking about it. I do know processing it helps. Um it's kind of like the way you deal with grief in the end is typically similar across the board, right?
Mm,
Like we all have to process, we all have to talk it out. Holding it inside does not help as much as people think. They'll just deal with it in
yeah.
their own way. It does not help. Um, Going back to work and just like ignoring it doesn't help. Like you know, what I'm saying like all these little things. Like people may
Well,
die in different ways.
eventually and I think that the specific to the people dying, it'll depend on your relationship with that person too.
Of
Because
course,
like a cousin of mine that I haven't seen since we were kids, his passing is going to affect me differently than
right?
say the cousin I grew right next to and we're best friends and his mom and my mom spend every holiday cooking for the family. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's gonna hit a little different because at that point you're more siblings than you are cousins,
right.
right? And the cousin that's in England or wherever is more stranger than they are your family,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
because you don't know that person. You don't grow up with them. You may have met once or twice in your life. And there's people in Toronto that I've met more times than I've met family.
Right.
And that's just the way we're scattered across the world. That's just the way it is, right?
Truth. Yeah.
So the closeness definitely is a factor. The relationship, the nature of the relationship, obviously, parents and children are going to be more impactful
Mhm.
than anything else. But I honestly didn't think we were going to talk this much about this particular topic, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I had a whole
Sounded
other
like
thing
you
in mind.
you sounded like it, but that's why I said like I don't mind doing these, but I guess that the time constraint is probably the biggest obstacle because we literally could talk for hours. I feel on just well, I could talk for hours about just about anything with anyone, right?
Yeah, same. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's always time and
yeah.
situations. And we'll stop there for now. Thank you for tuning in to part two. Looking forward to the conclusion tomorrow for part three of this conversation: surviving loss, therapy, parenting, and everything in between. Y'all, it's a journey, but one that when I look back, I'm grateful that I was strong enough to get through. Hey, thank you so much for listening to the Lips and Language podcast. My name is Kola. I am so excited that you are here. If anything I said today resonated, then get in touch with me. I have an amazing mentorship program. It is for those who feel misunderstood, overwhelmed, going through grief. It is truly an amazing time. If you want more info, hit my website, lipsandlanguage.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can hit it up on the website or DM me. I have a free gift for you, and I would love to be in contact with you. Whatever you decide, just know that healing, it looks good on you. And I'm so excited that we get to do this journey together. Have a blessed day. And if nobody told you, I will. I love you. Enjoy your day, and we'll talk soon. Peace.